What's up, YouTube? I'm going to show you every topic that you need to know to get an 800 on the SAT math section. I'm going to cover formulas, examples, and strategies. Part 1, Algebra. Thankfully, algebra isn't too formula heavy. The main formulas you have to know are slope-intercept form and the slope formula. Point-slope form occasionally shows up and can be useful, so I also threw it on there for good measure. Okay, so on screen here, I have a SAT practice test pulled up, and this is just to show you how much of it really is linear equations. So on this first page here, we got number 4 here, that deals with linear equations. Now let's scroll down. Number 5, this is linear equations. Number 6, linear equations. Number 7, linear equations. Number 8, linear equations. Number 9 is geometry, so not quite. Number 10, linear equations. Number 11, linear equations. Number 12, linear equations. Number 13, algebra. 14, system of equations. That classifies as algebra. We'll talk about that in a second. 15, algebra, linear equations. 16, that's exponential functions. We'll get to that in a bit. 17, ratios. We'll get to that in a bit. And then towards the end, it starts to drop off and not ask as many of those linear equation type questions. That's when we get into the harder ones. But basically, from what I just showed, that's basically half the test. That's linear equations in algebra. Number 5 here, make sure you know how to do this one. This is a common type of question that they like to ask on the SAT. Basically, this is a interpret the slope in this context type of question. This is how they'll phrase it. They'll often give you like some function. Here it's 100 plus 25t. And they'll either ask you what the y-intercept means or the slope means. In this case, we're dealing with a bank account. So you can just tell from that the 100 is going to be what amount of money you start with. And then 25 is going to be how much you put in every month. And then with that, you can basically tell it's A. So with these questions, the key to get them right is just know the slope is the rate of change. So that'll be what is changing per interval of time. And then the y-intercept's what you start with. So if you know that, these questions are pretty easy. Okay, so I want to do number 7 here. This is another common type of question they're going to ask. We have this guy, Nasir. He bought 9 storage bins that were all the same price. He used a coupon for $63 off the entire thing. And then after that, the total price was $27. So when you're given something like this with this wording, basically what they want you to do is make a linear equation and then solve it. So we have 9. 9 is our slope, basically. We have x, that's the number of bins. We take 63 off of that, and then we're left with 27. And then we just solve it for x. So that'll be 9x equals 90, and then x equals 10. So all you have to do is just make an equation and then solve it. Okay, so you should know how to do number 10 and 12 here. They're basically the same question, just a different flavor. So with number 10, you're given the scatter plot. And with these, what you want to do is just estimate like the line of best fit. It's going to look something like this, right? Not exact, but that's what we have to do. We're given this plot and we got to estimate. And then we have to look at this and go, okay, which equation is this most similar to? So the first thing we need to notice is that from left to right, it goes down, so it has a negative slope. That means that it's going to be either B or D. So we can cross out C and we can cross out A. We can see the y-intercept is going to be somewhere up here, so that means it needs to be between 9 and 10. That's going to be D. That's the one that has a y-intercept between 9 and 10, and that's going to be our answer. For number 12, this one's really easy. Just look at the y-intercept. That's going to be -8. So the answer needs to have a -8 in it. Well, they all do. It goes down from left to right, so it needs to have a negative slope. So we can cross out D. We can cross out B. And then we can just count the slope. So we go down 1, and then we go we go down 2, over 2. So the slope's going to be -2 over 2, which is going to be -1. Number 15 here, basically we have a slope of -1/3 and a point 9, 10. So you can go point slope formula here, or you can go y equals mx plus b. But I want to give you a little preview to one of the strategies. So this one you can answer really easily through back solving. So that means you're just going to plug in the point to the answers. and then you're just gonna see which one fits. And then what I would do, here's a pro tip. You see this divided by 3 one? That should clue you in that that's probably going to be the answer, because 9 is x, and 9 is very easily divisible by 3. So for C, if we do that, we get negative 9 over 3 plus 10. Well, that's just going to be 7. So that doesn't fit because it doesn't give us 10 for y. We need a y of 10. So let's try it here. We got negative 9 over 3 plus 10 equals, or I'm sorry, not plus 10, plus 13 equals, that's going to be 10. And so that checks out, and we can kind of do a little shortcut and answer that really fast. You're often going to get these system of equations problems on the SAT, kind of like number 14 here. What I recommend doing, since they let you use Desmos, is just type it into Desmos and look at the graph, since that's a really easy way and foolproof way to get the answer. So I've already typed it in. I'm going to pull it up over here. So we have these two lines. I'll zoom out, and we have to look at where they intersect. So if we zoom in, they basically intersect here at negative 1.333, comma 80. The question asks for y, so the answer is just going to be 80. So the last two things you should know for the algebra portion are functions and inequalities. These don't show up a ton, but you should still know them. They definitely will show up on your SAT. So functions, all you really got to know is basically f of x is the same thing as y. And if you know that, and we're trying to find f of 2, that's really just saying when I plug in 2 for x, what is y? So you just do 3 times 2 squared plus 2 equals, and then that'll be 3 times 4 plus 2. So that'll be 14, okay? If you know that, you should be able to answer any sort of function questions. And then inequalities, same thing. You just got to know that they work similar to equations. So you can just add the 4 over to the other side. And then 3x is going to be less than 12. You divide by 3. So then x is going to be less than 4. One thing I should mention, let's say you have like a negative, like negative 3x is less than 9. When you divide out by a negative, all you have to do is just make sure you flip the sign. So if you know this, you should be able to answer any function or inequality questions. Part 2, Advanced Math. On screen here, I wrote out many of the different formulas you're going to need to know. So the first one is the axis of symmetry formula. If you decide to just learn one formula on here, I would recommend learning this one. What this basically tells you is if you have a parabola, something like this, if you plug in that formula, it's going to always tell you the x value of the point that splits the parabola in half. That's why it's called the axis of symmetry. Vertex form this is another one I would highly recommend learning because they ask questions in this format a lot. If you have a parabola with a vertex, this basically just tells you the point of the vertex. It's always going to be h comma k, given by the numbers written in the formula up there. Quadratic formula, in these days with Desmos, you don't really need to know this, but I just threw it on there because maybe there might be like a niche scenario where you should learn this. It doesn't hurt to learn it. And then the sum of roots and product of roots, this formula right here. There are some niche questions with the like the constant questions where you'll be asked to find like K or C or A or B, like one of those type of questions where this formula comes in handy. So I would recommend learning this formula, but it's probably gonna only come in handy on maybe 1 or 2 questions that come at the end of the test. But if you're going for an 800, definitely need to know that. So in addition to those formulas, you should know how to factor quadratics and then use that to solve them. So with this one right here, what you need to do, you need to look at, okay, what number multiplies to 6 and adds to 5? So that's going to be 3 and 2 because 3 times 2 is 6 and 3 plus 2 is 5. And then you're going to write it like this, x plus 3 times x plus 2 equals 0. And then now you just break off each factor. So I'll do that over here. You just set x plus 3 equal to 0, and that'll be negative 3. And then you set x plus 2 equal to 0, and then x is going to be negative 2. Okay, so make sure you understand this. And then if the a term is not 1, basically it's a little different, but I'll show you the method I like to use to do these. I like to create a little square. So we will have our 2x squared here and our 3. And then basically we multiply the 2 and the 3 to get 6. And then we go, okay, what multiplies to 6 and adds to the middle term, which is 7. So that's going to be 6 and 1. And we just write them with an x, okay, for the square method. And then we go row by row, and we take the greatest common factor of each row. So this will be x, this will be 3, this will be 2x, and this will be 1. So this factored is going to be 2x plus 1 times x plus 3. A lot of problems are going to be predicated on the fact that you know how to do this. So number 18 here is a good example of those axis of symmetry questions I mentioned before on the formulas page. I must preface this before I start working the problem out. This can be very easily solved with Desmos, so if you leave a comment, that's why I'm not doing it. I just want to show how to use the axis of symmetry. If you know how to use Desmos for these quadratic questions, I recommend going to that method first, because obviously you're not going to make a mistake. Desmos isn't going to make a mistake. You might make a mistake if you work it out by hand. But to answer the question, this is asking where f of x reaches its minimum. So what we have to do is we have to FOIL it to get it in standard form. So when we do that, we'll get x squared plus 13x minus 10x minus 130. You should know how to FOIL, okay? So if you don't know what I did there, please watch a video on that. Then this simplifies to x squared plus 3x minus 130. And then now we're asked to find the x value where it reaches its minimum. This occurs at the axis of symmetry. Remember, negative b over 2a. I should mention, the axis of symmetry is it's the same thing as saying the minimum or the maximum. So if the parabola opens upwards, like this one, it'll be the minimum. If it opens downwards, it'll be the maximum. And you know that based on if there's a negative in front or not. So this has a positive coefficient, so it's going to open upwards. So we just plug in the b and the a term. So this is just going to be negative 3 over 2 times 1, which is just negative 3 over 2. Okay, so number 19 here is a textbook example of vertex form. We have this function which is given in vertex form. So right away, I'm going to write the point of the vertex. So it's going to be 7, 3. What this means is we have this parabola, and basically, let me draw that a little better. Basically, it's going to look something like this, and the vertex is going to be at 7, 3. So this will be the minimum point. Okay, and then now we just have to interpret like that in the context. So remember, x is the seconds, so the 7 represents the amount of seconds where it's at the minimum, and then f of x is dealing with height, so the height is 3 at the minimum. And then I'll just go right ahead and say it. A will be the answer because at that vertex, the minimum height is going to be 3, which is basically what A says. So these questions are pretty easy if you just know the vertex formula. Number 21 here, I'm not going to work it out, but I just want to show you how to do it, and then I'll leave that as a practice problem for you to do. So we're told that this equation has no real solution. What is the greatest possible value of B? So basically the way you want to approach these is remember the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Well, the part that tells us like how many solutions that the equation has is this square root part. It is known as the discriminant. So basically the, I'll bring it out here, the b squared minus 4ac part, if there's no real solution, is going to be less than 0, okay? So it's going to be negative. So with that info, you can set up the inequality and solve it. The last type of question they like to ask in the advanced math section is these exponential function questions. Basically, they're usually going to follow this pattern. You're going to have some sort of starting amount, and then you have a growth rate. And then an exponential function, when you graph it, it's going to look like this. So it goes up a ton, right? I'm sure you've seen this in math class. It's kind of like compound interest if you've dealt with that before. And In this question, they're just asking to interpret the context of f of 5 is approximately equal to 243. Okay, so the answer to this one, I want you to think about it for a second, read the question, then I'll tell you. It's going to be B. And the reason for that is basically we're dealing with time and we're dealing with years. So f of 5 is just how much money is in the account 5 years after it starts in 1957. So that's going to be 1962, and it's going to be $243. So it's pretty straightforward. And that's basically all you need to know to really do these kind of questions. They might ask it a little differently, phrase it a little differently, but if you know how to interpret this part right here, you should be good. It's nothing too crazy. You just have a principal, a starting amount, and a growth rate. One thing I should mention, the growth rate, the 1.034 part here, that is just the same thing as a 3.4% return every year. Okay, so it's interchangeable language. Part 3, problem solving and data analysis. Okay, so what I got on screen here is straight from the horse's mouth from College Board, what kind of questions they're gonna ask. I'm not gonna go over any example problems because you'll know them when you see them on your practice tests, and they're kind of niche. They only ask like maybe a couple of these per test, and they're honestly pretty easy, so I don't want to like bore you to death. Ratios, proportional relationships, units, like if you see something like 3 to 5 or like 4 over 5 equals x over 10, know how to solve for x. Units, know how to convert between different units. Percentages, a formula they like to ask a lot is percent change, so make sure you know that formula, percent change. Okay, make sure you know that. If you know that, you should be able to get most percentage questions. Distributions and measures of center and spread. This is really just like mean, median, mode, etc. Okay, no stats like that, like what they mean. Models and scatter plots. So like if I have a scatter plot like that of any sort of data set, just know how to interpret it. Again, this is like common sense. Probability and conditional probability. So know about random samples and like how to interpret. Like if you sample, let's say like 1,000 people out of a large population, and 30 people have like some disease, like what's the probability out of the the larger population, stuff like that. Okay, so those are typically pretty easy, but just be aware of those. Margin of error, this is kind of similar to sample, like probability questions. Just know that like you add the margin of error. So like let's say we have like a probability of 52%, margin of error 3%. The range is just going to be 49% to 55% of likely probabilities. If you take a stats class, you're going to go into a lot more detail, but for the SAT, that's really all you need to know. And then evaluating statistical claims, observational studies, and experiments. So those are just common sense questions where they're just going to give you like some sort of, I don't know, scenario, and you're just asked to interpret it. So again, these questions, nothing too crazy, and just go in the practice test and you'll identify them when you see them, and just practice those stats type of questions. And trust me, these are the easiest thing we've done so far. So if you can handle the like algebra and the quadratic and the exponential stuff, this should be a breeze. Part 4, geometry and trigonometry. On screen here, I got all the formulas you're gonna need to know for the geometry portion of the SAT. You're gonna need to know the area of triangles, rectangles, or squares. Remember, a square is just a rectangle where both sides are the same. And circles, you need to know the area of that. Also, make sure you know how to get the circumference. That doesn't hurt to know either. You need to know how to get the volume of rectangular prisms. Just multiply all the sides together. And make sure you know how to get the volume of cylinders. Basically, you just take the area of the circular base, and then you multiply that by the height. So if you know these formulas, you know how to get pretty much all of the area or volume questions. Okay, so number 20 here is a good example of a trig question you might see on the SAT. So we have this right triangle. It's called JKL. So let me draw it out. Yeah, it's JKL. Okay, and we know that cosine K is going to be 24 over 51. So that tells us that the adjacent side is going to be 24 and the hypotenuse is going to be 51. Remember your SOHCAHTOA? Well, that's how I got that. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. So now we need to find cosine L. So this angle right here. And to do that, we just need to take the adjacent side over the hypotenuse, and then we just need to get this adjacent side. That's going to come from Pythagorean theorem. So if this side is x, let's say, x squared plus 24 squared is going to equal 51 squared. And then I'm going to subtract over the 24 squared. So x squared equals 51 squared minus 24 squared. So then x is just going to equal the square root of that. And then if I type that in my calculator, that's going to be 45. So that means that cosine of L is going to equal 45 over 51. And then if we simplify that, we can divide it by 3. That's going to equal 15 over 17. They like to ask these circle equation questions. So here we're given x squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 49. And basically make sure that you know how to look at this and get the center and the radius. So the center is going to be 0, 1. Let me write that 0 better. Yeah, that'll be 0, 1. And then the radius is going to be 7. And then we're asked to just find the new circle when we shift down 2 units. So the new circle is going to be, center of 0, -1. And if you don't know like how I got the center, please let me know in a comment below, and let me know if you want me to make another video on that. But anyways, now the new one, it needs to have a center of 0 and -1. So that's just going to be D. So make sure you know how to like look at this and then see how I got D. Okay, these questions are really easy, but you really just got to know the equation of a circle. Part 5, strategy. Okay, the first strategy I want to go over is called back solving. This is where you plug in the answer choices into the answer to just check if they're right without actually solving the question yourself. So this is super useful because most questions on the SAT are multiple choice. So if you know the strategy, you can just get it without solving it. So like if I plug in A here, so if I plug in 15 for X and then 3 for Y, this is going to be 15 plus 3 equals 18. 18 is 18, so that checks out. And then in the bottom, 5 times 3 equals 15. Well, yeah, that's going to check out. So that's going to just tell us right away that that's our answer. Now, you might have to check all 3 of them, but honestly, this is easy enough that you can just plug it in your head and then see that that's the answer. So I recommend just plugging it in your head and then just checking it easily, rather than going through the process of solving this. So the next strategy that I want to show you is Desmos. So you guys are really lucky, you can use Desmos now on the SAT, and basically any sort of equation like number 12, I'm going to pull up my Desmos window. You can just type it in as it shows up into Desmos. Let me get that on screen. And then you're going to basically just be able to click the answer. So it'll be 2.25, which in fraction form is going to be B. So any equation, you can just plug it in straight to Desmos, and it'll essentially tell you the answer, which is really nice. If I scroll down, number 18 here, this is another example of a problem that can be easily solved by Desmos. It asks you where it reaches its minimum. So you can just type it in and then look at the graph and then just click it. So make sure you use Desmos. It's super useful. So the last SAT strategy I want to go over is just general timing strategies. I don't know if you guys are aware, but the SAT is ordered from easiest to hardest. So as you can see here, I'm at the beginning of the section. So it's like an easy graph question where you can just, look at the graph and answer. But as we go down, you'll see like now it's starting to get a little harder. We're throwing in constants. And then by the end, we got like circle questions and long word problems and exponential questions. So what you're going to want to do is these questions in the beginning, let me go back. like these, you want to knock them out really fast. Use your strategies like back solving, solve them in your head if you can, and then that will allow you time to do like the problems near the end, because you want to allot the most time for these problems, especially if you're going for like a really high score. If you want like an 800, you're going to need to get these right at the end. Those are going to be what's going to trip you up. And so you want to blaze through those like first half of the test so you can really hone in on those harder questions. And also, like, let's say you're going through the test and number 21 is tripping you up, right? Like, it's not the easiest question in the world. Skip it and then come back for later. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times when you're working through the test, it might not click right away, but as you go through and you give your brain some time to rest on that problem and work through the ones you do know, you're going to get that light bulb in your head. You're going to realize how to do it, and then you're going to go back and get it right. So don't be afraid to skip questions and try to do the beginning of the test as fast as you can. And that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to smash that like button down below and subscribe. It really helps the channel out a lot. Check out my website, mvplearners.com, if you're interested in tutoring. And I hope to see you guys in future videos.